front door came off the hinges at 3:11 in the morning. I know the exact time because the red numbers on my nightstand were glowing in the dark. 3:11. Then the shouting started. Police! Search warrant! Everyone on the ground! I was pinned to the oak floor, the smell of lemon beeswax mixing with the freezing Utah mountain air. My 7-year-old daughter Rachel screamed from the next room. I closed my eyes, my heart thudding for her fear, not the steel cuffs. Outside, my wife Courtney stood in her fur coat, calmly recording my arrest on her phone. She wasn't just standing there. She was staged, dressed in her most expensive fur as if she were attending the premiere of my downfall. If the person you loved most stood there recording your arrest in the middle of a snowstorm, would you crumble or would you fight? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The steel of the handcuffs was biting into my skin, but I didn't feel the pain. In my line of work, pain is just another data point. I've spent 22 years with the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. I don't see people as faces, I see them as balance sheets. In the back of that patrol car, as we wound down the snow-covered hills of Park City, I wasn't thinking about the wreckage of my marriage. I was thinking about the tire tracks I'd seen near our mailbox as they led me out. They were fresh, heavy treads. Not Courtney's Lexus, not my truck. Someone had been at the house at 2 in the morning, just an hour before the door came off the hinges. It was Jeffrey. I knew the tread patterns of his SUV. They had been at the house together, preparing for this moment while I slept. By the time we hit the station, I had already calculated the odds. A warrant for a 3 a.m. raid doesn't happen by accident. It requires a judge, a specific evidence package, and a convincing narrative that I was a flight risk. She had booked a one-way flight to a non-extradition country in my name, scheduled for 6:00 a.m. that morning, turning a paper investigation into a high-stakes hot pursuit. Courtney had spent months building this house of cards. I sat in the processing chair, the sickly yellow fluorescent lights burning into my retinas, and watched the young officers treat me like a contagion. They saw a middle-aged fraud suspect. I saw a group of amateurs who were about to have their case file incinerated. The formal charges were read with a clinical coldness: fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The amount was staggering: $2,800,000. It was a career-ending sum, a figure designed to bury a man for 20 years. But as I sat in that interrogation room, staring at the red light of the camera in the corner, I didn't feel despair. I felt a cold, sharp precision. I had spent 2 decades swimming in the worst of human nature. This wasn't a breakdown. This was accounting. My wife had overdrafted on my compassion for years, and now the bill was due. People ask why a man like me would trade a corner office in DC for a life in the shadows of the Wasatch Range. I was tired of being a predator. When I met Courtney, she was a widow with a 5-year-old boy named Jackson. I wanted to be the ground under his feet. When Rachel was born, I thought I had finally found my ultimate balance sheet. But as a forensic accountant, your brain is a double-edged sword. I noticed the first anomaly 6 months ago. It was a deposit of $8,400 into our joint account. It was small enough to hide in the noise, but too specific to be a gift. My training screamed at me to follow the trail, but I did something I had never done. I deliberately chose to be blind. I was choosing my daughter's peace over my own instincts. I wanted Jackson to see a man who stayed, who trusted. Now I realize that fraud is like rust. It doesn't stop just because you refuse to look at it. I thought I was the anchor, but I was really just the silent investor in a version of a life that was never actually for sale. The silence is finally over. I'm done investing in lies. At 4:12 in the morning, Detective Frank entered. He sat down and opened the file. I watched his eyes. Professional interest for 3 seconds, then a total freeze. He looked at my name, then at the summary of my federal service. I attended your seminar on anti-money laundering at Quantico back in 2019, Jason, Frank said, his voice dropping an octave. If you say this file is a forgery, I'm inclined to listen. Remove the cuffs, he told the officer by the door. Someone had tried to frame a man who knew exactly how to dismantle the trap. On my phone, the world was already tearing me apart. Courtney had posted the video, "Justice for my children, the mask of a financial monster falls." "Give me 8 minutes with that folder, Frank," I said. I pulled out a bank statement and held it under the desk lamp. "First, look at the headers. This document claims to be from First Horizon, but the font is Calibri. First Horizon uses a proprietary encrypted font called FH Sans for all official statements. Most people wouldn't notice a 3-pixel difference in a serif, but I've audited 300 forged bank files. This is amateur hour. Second, the dates. This wire transfer is marked for March 7th. That was a Sunday. Federal wire systems are dark on weekends. Money doesn't move on a Sunday. Third, and most devastating, the social security number is wrong. It's off by 1 digit. The last number should be a 4, not a 6. My wife had access to my templates, Frank. She copied the look, but she didn't have the clearance to know the back-end numbers. Only Courtney could have been this close and still missed the target. A notification flashed on my phone. It was a secure ping from a custom application I had installed on Jackson's laptop years ago, the Ghost Protocol. Jackson had been running a keylogger on Courtney's computer for 6 months. I had been quietly mentoring him in digital forensics since he was 12, ever since he first whispered his doubts to me about the night his biological father's brakes mysteriously failed. The data file he sent wasn't just about the current fraud, it was a map to the cemetery of her past. Jackson found the original insurance claims from 10 years ago. The data Jackson captured provided the FBI with the probable cause they needed to secure a legal warrant. Once they had the keys to her encrypted vault, Courtney's house of cards didn't just fall, it was incinerated. Courtney hadn't just become a monster, she had been one from the beginning. She had tampered with his biological father's brakes for the insurance payout. Now, she and Jeffrey were preparing to transfer the stolen $2,800,000 to a shell company called Blue Alpine Holdings at 7 p.m. tonight. Jackson used the very skills I taught him, precision, patience, to save the only father who had actually earned the title. Courtney thought she was the smartest person in the room, but she had underestimated the son she had ignored. It was 7:11 in the evening, exactly 16 hours since the raid. I walked up the driveway, my steps deliberate. The house was glowing with a warm amber light. I pushed open the front door. The plywood patch was a jagged reminder of the morning, but it gave way easily. Jackson had already moved Rachel to my sister's house hours ago, shielding her from the toxicity of a mother who saw her own children as collateral damage. Inside, I could hear the clink of glasses. Courtney and Jeffrey were celebrating. I stepped into the room, my face a mask of clinical detachment. Courtney dropped her wine glass, the red liquid splattering across the rug like an arterial spray. Jeffrey sat frozen in my favorite leather chair. He looked like a man who thought he had already inherited my life, a squatter making himself comfortable in a throne he hadn't earned. "You're late for the party, Jeffrey," I said. I laid out 3 documents. The first was the wire transfer record to the Caymans. The second was the backup Jackson pulled, the Ghost Protocol, containing the emails about the tampered brakes from 10 years ago. Jackson saved the only father who bothered to teach him how to protect himself, I countered. I pointed toward the base of the hill. A phalanx of blue and red lights was winding its way up. During my 16-hour window of freedom, I hadn't just been auditing. I had been calling in every favor from my 2 decades at the IRS-CI to ensure this became a federal matter. It wasn't the local sheriff this time, it was the FBI. "I'm not the monster you filmed this morning, Courtney," I said. "I'm just the auditor. And after 16 hours, I finally finished the reconciliation." Courtney and Jeffrey were indicted for wire fraud, money laundering, and the insurance racketeering scheme that had been hidden for a decade. They were sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. But that was just the beginning. The evidence Jackson uncovered reopened the investigation into his father's death, ensuring Courtney would never see the outside of a cell again. Seeing my wife led away in a jumpsuit wasn't about revenge. It was just the final entry in a very painful audit. I'm back in Park City now. The first thing I did was replace that splintered front door. It is solid oak now with a deadbolt I installed myself. It is a door built to protect what's inside, not just to project wealth. Custody of Rachel was awarded to me without a fight. Courtney's performance in the driveway that morning cost her any moral claim to motherhood. Jackson turned 18 6 months ago, but he didn't leave. He officially applied for a degree in cybersecurity. I've never been prouder of a son I didn't share blood with. Trust isn't the absence of awareness. It is the presence of respect. If someone truly loves you, they won't ask you to look the other way while they dismantle your life. The truth is patient. It doesn't need to scream. I finally stopped pretending, and for the first time in my life, the air up here feels easy to breathe. The truth might be slow, but it is never absent. If Jason's journey gave you the strength to protect your own boundaries, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to join our community and explore more journeys of justice and integrity. The truth is in your hands, and it's the only thing that can truly set you free.